A single mother was fired for being late after helping an injured man on the street. It was her millionaire boss. When he found out, he fell in love, and their lives changed forever. A story of fate and love that will touch your heart. Subscribe, leave a like, and comment where you are watching from. Bye. The rain pounded relentlessly on the roof tiles of the East Side housing complex. Sarah Johnson woke up at 5 in the morning to the familiar sound of raindrops leaking through the ceiling of her small two-room apartment. At 32, she had developed a military routine to manage everything, waking her daughter Emily, 12, making breakfast with what was left in the fridge, sorting out her school uniform, and still managing to arrive on time at Hope Textiles, where she had worked for 4 years. As a sewing machine operator. "Mum, it's raining a lot," murmured Emily, rubbing her sleepy eyes. The girl was slender, with curly hair she inherited from her mother, but possessed a sharp intelligence that always impressed her teachers. Her brown eyes sparkled with curiosity, even on the toughest mornings. "I know, sweetheart. Grab the broken umbrella over there in the corner and walk carefully to school," Sarah replied, quickly brushing her own rebellious brown hair. Her green eyes, once described by a boyfriend as the color of hope, now carried the fatigue of someone who slept little and worried a lot. Sarah put on her navy blue factory uniform, a faded polo shirt and pants that had been patched 3 times. Her hands, calloused from years of work, trembled slightly as she buttoned her shirt. It wasn't nervousness. It was hunger. The previous night's dinner had been shared with Emily, and she always made sure her daughter ate most of it. "Mum, aren't you going to eat anything?" asked Emily, noticing that her mother was only having weak black coffee. "I already ate, my love. Now go, or you'll be late," Sarah lied, kissing her daughter's forehead. The walk to the bus stop was always an adventure during the rainy season. The neighborhood streets turned into small rivers, and Sarah had to dodge puddles that concealed holes capable of swallowing a whole shoe. She wore a pair of rubber sandals she bought for $15 on sale, which still represented a sacrifice in her tight budget. The 297 bus arrived 20 minutes late, as usual. Sarah squeezed between wet passengers, smelling the characteristic scent of damp clothes mixed with cheap perfumes and sweat. She closed her eyes and tried to mentally transport herself to a better place, a habit she developed to cope with daily hardships. At 7:15, Sarah got off at Oak Avenue, still with a 15-minute walk to the factory. The rain had reduced to a persistent drizzle, but the cold July wind cut through her thin uniform like blades. She quickened her pace, knowing she was already at the limit of allowed absences. In the last 2 months, Emily had been sick 3 times, and Sarah had to miss work to care for her. Supervisor Michael Thompson did not accept excuses. Absence was absence, regardless of the circumstances. It was then that she saw it. At the corner of Maple Street and Oak Avenue, a luxury black car was overturned against a lamppost. Smoke was rising from the crumpled hood, and shards of glass scattered across the asphalt glimmered under the grey morning light. Sarah instinctively stopped, her heart racing. There was no one around, too early, and the rain had driven away the few pedestrians who usually passed through the area. She cautiously approached the vehicle. Through the driver's window, she could see a man seemingly unconscious. He was about 35 years old, with dark hair slightly graying at the temples, wearing an expensive suit, now stained with blood. His face, even injured, had aristocratic features, a defined jawline, a straight nose, skin that had never known the merciless sun of the streets. "Sir, can you hear me?" Sarah shouted, tapping on the glass. The man murmured something unintelligible. He was alive, but clearly injured. Sarah looked at her watch. 7:25. If she stayed there, she would lose at least an hour of her shift. But how could she leave someone injured alone? "I can't leave you here," she said to herself, pulling out her phone to call EMS. "This is EMS. What is the nature of the emergency?" "There's an injured man here at the corner of Maple and Oak. The car is overturned and he's bleeding," Sarah explained, trying to keep her voice calm. "An ambulance is on the way. Do not move the victim and stay on the scene until we arrive." Sarah hung up the phone and crouched by the window. The man had opened his eyes. They were blue like the sky after the storm, but now clouded with pain. "Stay calm, okay? The ambulance is coming. What's your name?" I... He tried to speak, but the words came out distorted. "Don't strain yourself. I'll stay here with you." Sarah took off her jacket, a faded hoodie she had received at a church charity sale, and managed to pass it through the slightly open window to cover the man. The lavender scent she wore mixed with the smell of metal and broken glass. Minutes dragged on like hours. Sarah maintained a one-sided conversation, talking about Emily, how the neighborhood was changing, anything to keep the man conscious. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher, gratitude mixed with something deeper. "Why? Why didn't you leave?" he finally managed to murmur. "Because everyone deserves to have someone by their side in a time like this," Sarah simply replied. "When the ambulance..." Finally, it had arrived. It was 9:15 in the morning. Sarah was soaked to the bone, shivering from the cold, but she had stayed by the injured man's side the entire time. The paramedics acted quickly, stabilizing the man before taking him to the general hospital. "Thank you," were the last words he managed to say before being placed on the stretcher, his blue eyes fixed on Sarah's face. She nodded, feeling a strange connection with that stranger. Then she grabbed her wet bag and ran to the factory, knowing she was over 2 hours late. Her sandals made a squelching sound with every step, and she mentally rehearsed the words she would say to her supervisor, Michael. Hope Textiles was a grey 3-story building with small windows and an internal courtyard where employees had their meals. The smell of fabric and machine oil permeated everything, and the noise of sewing machines created a constant industrial symphony. Sarah worked on the second floor, in a room with 20 other women, all seated in organized rows like soldiers. Michael Thompson was waiting at the entrance, arms crossed over his broad chest. At 45, he was a short, stocky man with a graying mustache and a permanently scowling expression. He always wore the same white dress shirt and a blue tie that never seemed to move out of place. "Sarah Johnson, 2 hours late. This is unacceptable," he said, his voice echoing down the hallway. "Mr. Thompson, I can explain. There was an accident on the street, and I had to help an injured person. I called EMS and stayed until the ambulance arrived," Sarah explained, still breathless from running. "There's always an excuse, isn't there, Sarah? Sick child, rain, traffic, now an accident. Do you think I was born yesterday?" "It's not an excuse, Mr. Thompson. It's the truth. You can call EMS and confirm." "I'm not calling anyone. Your excessive absences and tardiness are harming production. You're fired." "What do you mean, fired, Mr. Thompson? You can't do this. I have a daughter to support." "You should have thought about that before being late every week. Go get your things and settle your accounts with HR." Sarah felt the world collapse around her. The other employees stopped working to watch the scene, their faces reflecting a mix of compassion and relief that it wasn't them. The noise of the machines continued, indifferent to the human drama unfolding. "Please, Mr. Thompson, give me one more chance. I promise I won't be late again." "Decision made, Sarah, and don't bother complaining to the bosses because they don't even know you exist." With tears in her eyes, Sarah went upstairs to gather her belongings. A spare coat, a plastic mug, and a photo of Emily that she kept taped to her machine. Her colleagues whispered words of support, but no one dared to confront Michael directly. Everyone needed their job. As she left the factory, Sarah had no idea that the man she had saved was actually the owner of the company that had just fired her, and even less that this act of kindness would completely change the course of her life. The rain had stopped, but the dark clouds still dominated the sky over Springfield, as if sensing the storms yet to come. Gabriel Anderson opened his eyes. In the sterile room of the General Hospital, the smell of disinfectant invading his nostrils. The fluorescent light from the ceiling hurt his eyes, still sensitive from the head trauma. At 35, he was used to waking up in five-star hotel suites around the world, not in hospital beds with rough sheets and the constant sound of heart monitors. "Mr. Anderson, how are you feeling?" asked the nurse, a middle-aged woman with a professional smile. She checked the machines connected to his body as if reviewing a shopping list. Gabriel tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his head like lightning. "What day is it?" he murmured, his voice hoarse. "Tuesday, sir. You had an accident yesterday morning. You hit your head quite hard, but the tests showed no serious injuries. You were lucky." Lucky. Gabriel laughed bitterly. Heir to a textile empire built by his grandfather in the 1950s, he rarely considered himself lucky. The family fortune, valued at over $200 million, was both a blessing and a curse. He had grown up in mansions, attended the best private schools in Springfield, spent 2 years in Switzerland, perfecting his French, and another 3 in the United States studying business at Harvard. But Gabriel carried a weight that money couldn't alleviate, the constant feeling that he didn't deserve anything he had. Unlike his grandfather, Anthony Anderson, who had come to America as a Portuguese immigrant with not a penny to his name, or his father, Richard, who expanded the business with vision and hard work, Gabriel had simply inherited everything ready-made. He was the typical trust fund baby that economic newspapers loved to criticize. "Where are my belongings?" Gabriel asked, vaguely remembering the accident. "They're in the cabinet. Your phone rang several times. Your secretary called, worried." Gabriel picked up the cracked iPhone and saw 17 missed calls from Helena Smith, his secretary for 8 years. Helena was an efficient 45-year-old woman, always impeccably dressed, who managed his schedule like a general commanding troops. She knew more about his life than he did at times. "Helena, it's me," Gabriel said when she answered on the first ring. "Gabriel!" "Thank God. Where have you been?" "I cancelled all your meetings yesterday and today. The board is worried," Helena fired off in her characteristic speed. "I had an accident. I'm in the hospital, but I'll be discharged soon." "Accident? What do you mean? Do I need to send the driver to pick you up?" Gabriel closed his eyes, trying to remember the details. He had been returning from Springfield, where he had inspected one of the Hope Textiles units. It was a surprise visit, something he rarely did, preferring to trust in the management reports. But lately, he felt the need to be closer to operations, perhaps in a desperate attempt to feel useful. "You don't need to." "I can handle it," replied Gabriel, hanging up before Helena could protest. Fragments of memory began to return like pieces of a puzzle. He remembered the heavy rain, the car skidding on the wet curve, the impact against the pole. But there was something more, a sweet, comforting female voice, a woman who stayed by his side until the ambulance arrived. Gabriel tried to remember her face, but the images were hazy. He only recalled worried green eyes and a soft lavender scent that contrasted with the metallic smell of the accident. Whoever she was, she had saved his life by calling for help and staying with him. "Nurse, the person who found me—" "Do you know who she was?" Gabriel asked. "I don't have that information, sir. The EMS only told us that a woman made the call." Gabriel felt a strange frustration. He was used to solving problems with money or influence, but now he needed to find someone he only knew by voice and a lavender scent. 3 days later, Gabriel was discharged with a recommendation for rest. His mansion in the Garden District felt even emptier than usual. The 3-story house with gardens tended by a team of gardeners, an Olympic-sized pool, and a garage for 12 cars echoed with the sound of his solitary footsteps. "Mr. Gabriel, I prepared your favorite dinner," said Mrs. Smith, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for 20 years. She was a short, round woman, with grey hair always tied in a strict bun. "Thank you, Mrs. Smith, but I'm not hungry." Gabriel went up to his office on the second floor, a room lined with fine wood and shelves filled with books he never read and diplomas. He hung more out of obligation than pride. He sat in the leather armchair behind the mahogany desk and contemplated the view of the gardens through the panoramic window. He thought about the unknown woman again. Why had she helped him? In his world, people only did favors expecting something in return. But she had simply disappeared after the ambulance arrived, without even leaving a name or phone number. "Mr. Gabriel?" Mrs. Smith knocked on the door. "Your mother is on the line." Gabriel sighed. Beatrice Anderson was an elegant 62-year-old woman, always involved in high society charitable causes. She had impeccably styled platinum hair and wore jewelry that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. "Gabriel, my son, I heard about the accident. Why didn't you call me?" Her voice carried the authoritative tone he had known since childhood. "I didn't want to worry you, Mom. Don't give me nonsense. I've already scheduled an appointment with Dr. Ferreira for tomorrow. You're going for a complete checkup." "Mom, I'm fine." "You're not. And another thing, Patricia Almeida called yesterday. The senator's daughter, remember? She's interested in rekindling your relationship." Gabriel rubbed his temples. Patricia was everything his family expected from a daughter-in-law. Beautiful, well-educated, from a traditional family and with the right political connections. They had dated for 2 years, a relationship more formal than passionate, which ended when she realized Gabriel had no intentions of marrying anytime soon. "Mom, please, this isn't the time for that. You're 35 years old, Gabriel. You can't stay alone forever. Patricia would be perfect for you." After hanging up, Gabriel went down to the garage and chose the most discreet BMW from his collection. He needed to get out, breathe, think. He drove aimlessly through the streets of São Paulo, observing the city he knew so well and yet so little. He stopped at a traffic light on Paulista Avenue and watched the hurried pedestrians on the sidewalk. Businessmen in suits, college students, street vendors, all these lives intersecting in a chaotic urban ballet. Gabriel wondered how many interesting stories were unfolding right there in front of him while he lived isolated in his golden bubble. It was then that he decided he needed to find the woman who saved him. He didn't know exactly why, but he felt it was important. Perhaps it was gratitude, perhaps curiosity, or maybe something deeper that he still couldn't comprehend. The next day, Gabriel called Robert Johnson, a private investigator the family occasionally used for discreet inquiries. Robert was a 50-year-old former civil police officer with an ordinary appearance, but extremely competent in his work. "I need you to find someone for me," said Gabriel, explaining the few details he remembered about the accident. "I'll check the security cameras in the area and talk to the EMS personnel. I should have an answer in a few days." While waiting, Gabriel tried to focus on business. Hope Textiles had 5 units in the state of São Paulo, employed over 3,000 workers, and served major retail chains. But no matter how hard he tried to get involved, he felt like a stranger in his own company. "The quarterly numbers are great," reported Fernando Carvalho, the financial director, during a meeting. "Profit margins are up, costs are controlled." Gabriel looked at the spreadsheets, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of the sweet voice that comforted him during the worst moments of the accident, the feeling that he had found something genuine in a world full of falsehood. 3 days later, Robert called with news. "I found your good Samaritan," he said. "Sarah Johnson, 32 years old, single mother, used to work at your factory in the East Side." Gabriel almost dropped the phone. "What do you mean, used to work?" "She was fired on the same day she saved you. She arrived 2 hours late because of the accident, and the supervisor wouldn't even listen to her explanations." Gabriel felt his blood boil. The woman who saved his life had lost her job because of it, and at his own company. Who was the supervisor? Michael Thompson. "From what I found out, he has a history of being inflexible with employees." Gabriel hung up and stood still in the middle of the office, processing the information. The irony of the situation was cruel. The woman who had saved him was punished by the very company he managed. And the worst part was that if Robert hadn't investigated, he would have never known. That night, Gabriel couldn't sleep. He wandered through the empty mansion, thinking about how to correct that injustice. But more than that, he felt an urgent need to know more about the woman who had risked her own well-being to help a complete stranger. For the first time in years, Gabriel Anderson had a purpose that went beyond simply managing an inheritance. He needed to find Sarah Johnson. Topic 3. Free Fall. Sarah Johnson returned home that Tuesday in July, carrying only a plastic bag, with her belongings from the factory and a knot in her throat that seemed to grow with each step. The East Side housing complex had never seemed so desolate to her as it did at that moment. The rows of low-income apartment buildings stretched endlessly, like grey soldiers marching toward the horizon. The elevator in Block 17 was broken again, forcing her to climb 6 flights of stairs. With each step, the weight of reality became more oppressive. Without a job, how would she pay the rent of $500? How would she buy food? How would she explain to Emily that things were going to get even harder? "Mom, you're home early today," Emily said when Sarah opened the door to apartment 62. The girl was sitting at the kitchen table, leaning over a math book, her curly hair falling over her focused face. Sarah tried to force a smile, but she couldn't fool her daughter. Emily had a keen emotional intelligence, a result of growing up, observing her mother's constant worries. "Did something happen?" the girl asked, closing the book. "I got fired," Sarah said, sitting heavily in the plastic chair next to her daughter. There was no point in lying. Emily would find out anyway. "Because of the man from the accident?" Sarah nodded, feeling tears burning in her eyes. "I was 2 hours late, and the supervisor didn't even want to hear my explanation." Emily stood up and hugged her mother, her thin arms offering all the comfort a 12-year-old could give. "We'll figure it out, Mom. We always." That night, Sarah barely slept. She lay on the thin mattress, listening to Emily's calm breathing in the top bunk, calculating and recalculating her finances. She had $300 in her savings account, plus $100 in cash hidden in a coffee can. It was enough money for 2 weeks, 3 at most if she drastically cut expenses. The next morning, Sarah left early to look for a job. She visited all the textile factories in the area, Paulista Textiles, St. Michael Knits, United Fabrics, but the response was always the same. "We'll keep your resume and contact you if something comes up." The polite tone barely disguised the cruel reality of the job market for women her age without a college degree. "Do you have experience with an overlock machine?" asked the supervisor at St. Michael Knits, a thin man with thick glasses. "I have 4 years of experience with all kinds of industrial machines," Sarah replied, trying to sound confident. "Okay, if something comes up, we'll call." Sarah knew they wouldn't call. She had seen the same indifferent look dozens of times, the look of someone who had already decided she wasn't suitable before even getting to know her properly. The first 2 weeks passed in a blur of frustrating interviews and sleepless nights. Sarah applied for unemployment benefits, but the process would take at least a month. She started selling some clothes in a neighborhood Facebook group, 2 blouses for $20, a skirt for $15, a winter coat for $30. "Mom, where's my blue blouse?" Emily asked one Thursday morning. I had to sell it, sweetie," Sarah admitted, feeling like she was failing as a mother. Emily said nothing, but Sarah saw disappointment flash quickly in her daughter's eyes before she forced a sympathetic smile. By the end of the first month, the situation had become desperate. Sarah had managed only 2 sporadic jobs, a cleaning gig at a veterinary clinic that paid $80 and 3 days, helping with a move for $150. It wasn't even close to enough. "Miss Johnson," Mr. Anderson, the building's doorman, said as she passed by the lobby. He was a 60-year-old man, always kind, who knew all the residents by name. "The landlord is asking for the rent. It's already 15 days overdue." "I know, Mr. Anderson. I'll settle it by the end of the week," Sarah lied, knowing she had no way to keep that promise. That night, Sarah opened the refrigerator and faced the almost empty void. half a liter of sour milk, 2 slices of stale bread, and a bit of margarine. In the cupboard, there was only a package of pasta and a can of tomato sauce left. "Mom, is there dinner?" Emily asked, coming home from school with her heavy backpack on her shoulders. "Of course there is," Sarah said, cooking the pasta and dividing it into 2 unequal portions, the larger one for Emily, of course. "Aren't you going to eat?" the girl observed, noticing that her mother was just watching her eat. "I had dinner at Mrs. Johnson's house," Sarah lied again. Mrs. Johnson was a neighbor who sometimes offered sewing jobs, but nothing had come up in 2 weeks. The next morning, Sarah made a painful decision. She took her graduation ring from the technical school, her only valuable piece of jewelry, bought with great sacrifice years ago, and went to a pawn shop on Oratorio Street. "I can give you $50, said the man behind the counter, examining the ring with a magnifying glass. "It's worth at least 200, protested Sarah. "Here it's 50. "Take it or leave it." Sarah took it. $50 would buy food for a week if she was very careful. At the supermarket, Sarah tortured herself with every choice. Rice was essential. Beans too. Eggs were cheap protein. Milk for Emily was a priority. She spent 20 minutes in front of the fruit section, wishing she could buy an apple for her daughter. But she knew every dollar counted. "Mom, why didn't you buy a banana?" Emily asked later, helping to put away the groceries. "It was too expensive this week," Sarah said, avoiding her daughter's questioning gaze. Emily was too smart to be fooled for long. She had noticed that her mother was eating less and less, that her clothes were becoming looser on her body, that she spent hours online searching for work with an increasingly desperate expression. "Mom, maybe I could get a weekend job," Emily suggested one night while they did homework together under the kitchen lamp. "You're 12, Emily. Your job is to study," Sarah said firmly. No matter how bad the situation was, she would never allow her daughter to abandon her studies. "But if I only worked on Saturdays—" "No," Sarah cut in. "You will continue studying and you will have a better life than mine. That's non-negotiable." In the second month of unemployment, Sarah had to make even more drastic decisions. She sold the 32-inch television she had bought on credit the previous year. She still owed half, but she managed to get $300 for it. The 2-seater sofa went for $200, the dining table for $100. The apartment became progressively emptier, echoing with each step. Emily didn't complain, but Sarah saw sadness in her daughter's eyes when she looked at the empty spaces where furniture used to be. "At least we still have the beds," Emily said in an attempt to cheer her mother up, but her voice carried a forced maturity that broke Sarah's heart. The worst humiliation came at the end of the second month, when Sarah needed to seek help at the local church. St. Joseph's Church offered food baskets for struggling families, but accepting charity was something that went against all the principles of independence that Sarah had cultivated her entire life. "There's no shame in accepting help when you need it," said Sister Conception, a middle-aged nun with a genuinely warm smile. "We all go through tough times." Sarah took the food basket home hidden in a bag, as if it were contraband. Rice, beans, oil, sugar, pasta, basic items that represented dignity preserved for a few more weeks. "Where did this food come from?" Emily asked, helping to organize the groceries. "From the church," Sarah admitted, preparing to see judgment in her daughter's eyes. Instead, Emily simply nodded. "Sister Conception is really nice. She always says that God helps those who help others." That night, Sarah reflected on her daughter's words. She had indeed helped someone, the man from the accident. But where was her reward? Where was the divine justice that Sister Conception preached? Looking out the window of the increasingly empty apartment, seeing the city lights that seemed indifferent to her suffering, Sarah wondered if she had made the right choice that rainy morning. Maybe she should have moved on, arrived on time, kept her job. But then she remembered the blue eyes of the injured man, the sincere gratitude in his voice, the feeling of having done the right thing. Even with all the terrible consequences that followed, she knew she would make the same choice again. What Sarah didn't know was that, at that very moment, on the other side of the city, Gabriel Anderson was about to discover the truth about who she was and what had happened after she saved him. Gabriel Anderson was sitting in his conference room on the 23rd floor of the commercial building in the Olympic Village, watching the traffic in Springfield through the bulletproof glass when Robert Johnson knocked on the door. The private investigator carried a brown folder under his arm and wore a serious expression that Gabriel had learned to recognize as a sign of bad news. "Come in, Robert. Did you bring information about the woman from the accident?" Gabriel asked, dismissing Helena, who was organizing papers on the mahogany table. Robert sat in the leather chair, opening the folder with precise movements. He was a meticulous man who valued details, a trait that had made him one of the best private investigators in the city. "I have everything here, Mr. Anderson, and I need to tell you that the situation is more complicated than we thought," Robert said, extending a series of photographs and documents. Gabriel picked up the first photo, a low-quality image captured by a security camera at a gas station near the accident site. It showed a woman with brown hair and average height, crouched next to an overturned car. Even with the poor quality of the image, he recognized the protective posture, the way she leaned in to comfort someone. "Sarah Johnson," Robert said, checking his notes. 32 years old, single mother, originally from Springfield. She worked for 4 years at Hope Textiles as an industrial machine operator. Records show she was an exemplary employee. No unexcused absences, no disciplinary issues, above-average productivity. Gabriel flipped through the documents, copies of her work ID, performance reports, even a photo of her employee badge. The face in the photo had the same green eyes he vaguely remembered from the accident, but there was something more. A quiet determination, a dignity that shone through even in a document photo. "And the daughter?" Gabriel asked, noticing mention of a dependent in the records. "Emily Johnson, 12 years old. Excellent student at Springfield High School. The girl has been on the honor roll for 3 consecutive semesters," Robert reported. "Small family, no criminal history, neighbors speak well of them." Gabriel nodded, but he sensed that Robert was hesitating to continue. "There's more, isn't there?" Robert sighed deeply. "Yes, sir, and this part won't please you. Sarah Johnson was fired on the same day she saved you." "What do you mean?" Gabriel asked. He leaned forward, his voice taking on a dangerous tone. "She arrived 2 hours late to work because of the time she spent helping the gentleman. The supervisor in charge, Michael Thompson, fired her for just cause, citing excessive absences." Gabriel felt his blood boil. He abruptly stood up from the chair, walking over to the panoramic window. Down below, the city buzzed with its millions of inhabitants chasing their dreams and needs. But all he could think about was a woman who lost her job for saving him. "Michael Thompson," Gabriel repeated, the name tasting bitter in his mouth. Did he know she was helping an accident victim? Yes, he did. She explained the situation, but he didn't want to hear it. From the testimonies I've gathered, Thompson has a reputation for being inflexible with employees. Several former workers have complained about his treatment. Gabriel clenched his fists. He only knew Thompson from reports. A production supervisor with 20 years at the company, considered efficient by the managers, but efficiency-based. On what? On terrorizing honest employees. "Where is she now?" Gabriel asked, trying to control his anger. Robert consulted his notes again. "Unemployed for 2.5 months. The financial situation is complicated. She tried to find work at other textile companies in the area, but the market is saturated. From the bank records I was able to access legally, she sold some furniture to pay the bills." "Bank records?" Gabriel turned, raising an eyebrow. "Nothing invasive, sir. Just information from credit reports and public inquiries, but they confirm that she's going through serious financial difficulties." Gabriel returned to the chair, picking up the employee ID photo again. Sarah's green eyes seemed to look directly at him, carrying a silent dignity that made him feel even worse. "How long has Thompson worked for us?" Gabriel asked. 23 years. He started as a machine operator and was promoted to supervisor 8 years ago. And I never knew any of this, Gabriel murmured to himself. An exemplary employee loses her job for saving my life, and I don't even find out. Robert closed the folder. Do you want me to continue investigating? No, Gabriel said, a new determination growing in his voice. I want you to give me her address. I'm going to speak with her personally. Sir, maybe it's better if... The address, Robert. Robert scribbled the address on a piece of paper. East Side Housing Complex, Building 17, Apartment 62. After Robert left, Gabriel was alone in the office, contemplating the paper with the address. East Side Housing Complex was a completely different world from his. A peripheral area he only knew from socio-economic reports and news stories. He had never set foot there. Helena, Gabriel called on the intercom. Yes, sir? Cancel all my appointments for today, and I want to speak with the HR director of the East Side unit. 30 minutes later, Charles Miller, HR director of Hope Textiles' East Side unit, was nervously sitting in the same chair Robert had occupied before. Charles was a 45-year-old man, always well-dressed, who had worked for the company for 15 years and was rarely called to meetings at headquarters. Charles, I need you to explain the dismissal procedures for our unit, Gabriel said, his voice controlled but cold. Of course, Mr. Anderson. We follow all the legal protocols established by labor laws and... I don't care about the bureaucracy, Gabriel interrupted. I want to know about the specific case of Sarah Johnson. Charles swallowed hard. Sarah Johnson, let me check here. He opened his laptop, typing quickly. Ah, yes. Fired in July for excessive absences. Supervisor Michael Thompson claimed she was consistently late. And did you verify those claims? Well, I trust the judgment of the floor supervisors. They know the employees' situations better. Gabriel leaned forward. Charles, did you know that on the day of her dismissal, Sarah Johnson was late because she was assisting a traffic accident victim? No. I didn't know that specific detail. And did you know that this accident victim was me? Charles's face visibly paled. Sir, if I had known. If you had known, what? Would it have made a difference if it was someone else injured? Does her character only matter if she saved the owner of the company? Charles stammered some incomprehensible words, clearly desperate to find an answer that wouldn't further compromise his situation. Gabriel stood up, walking back to the window. Charles, I want you to investigate all dismissal cases approved by Michael Thompson in the last 2 years. I want detailed reports, including justifications and possible employee appeals. Yes, sir. When do you need it? Tomorrow morning on my desk. After Charles left, visibly shaken, Gabriel called Helena. Helena, I need you to prepare a car, not the armored one. Something more discreet. Where are we going, sir? East Side Housing Complex. And Helena, I'm going to drive alone. Sir, that's not safe. At least take Miguel, Helena said, referring to the family's private driver. No, this is something I need to do alone. Gabriel went down to the garage and chose the black Honda Civic, the simplest car in his collection. As he drove along the highways toward the east side, he tried to imagine what the meeting would be like. What would he say to a woman who lost her job for saving him? How could he compensate for such a cruel injustice? More importantly, why did he feel this urgent need to get to know her better? Was it just gratitude, guilt, or was there something deeper he still couldn't comprehend? The traffic was heavy on the East Radial, giving him time to think. Gabriel looked around. Workers returning home on crowded buses, street vendors on the corners, children playing on the sidewalks. It was a world bursting with life, so different from the sterile, controlled environments in which he lived. When he finally arrived at the East Side Housing Complex, Gabriel parked and observed the buildings around him. They were simple constructions, but there was dignity there. Colorful clothes hanging on balconies, children laughing in the playground, people greeting each other with familiarity. Gabriel walked to Building 17, feeling completely out of place in his. He wore a tailored suit. Some people looked at him with curiosity, but without hostility. In the broken elevator, he climbed the 6 flights of stairs, finally stopping in front of apartment 62. He took a deep breath and knocked on the door, unaware that on the other side was the woman who would completely change his perspective on what truly matters in life. Trying again. Continue topic 5, the unexpected meeting. Sarah was on her knees, on the kitchen floor, scrubbing it with a mixture of detergent and bleach when she heard the knocks on the door. It was a Thursday in September, and she had managed to get a temporary job as a cleaner at Mr. Johnson's accounting office downtown. It paid only $15 a day, but it was better than nothing. "Emily, can you get that?" Sarah shouted, not taking her eyes off the floor that stubbornly refused to be as clean as she wanted. "Mum, there's a man here who wants to talk to you," Emily said, her voice carrying a note of curiosity mixed with caution. Sarah sighed, wiping her wet hands on the worn apron she wore to protect her clothes. It was probably the landlord demanding the overdue rent again, or maybe a neighbor complaining about the noise, though they were always careful not to disturb anyone. When she opened the door, Sarah felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. In front of her stood a tall man, dressed in a dark suit that cost more than she earned in 6 months. He had dark hair with grey streaks at the temples, well-groomed skin, and blue eyes that she recognized instantly, even without the blood and chaos of the accident. "Sarah Johnson?" he asked, his deep voice carrying a formal education that brutally contrasted with the environment of the housing complex. Yes, that's me," Sarah stammered, instinctively hiding behind the door. She was wearing faded sweatpants and an old t-shirt, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail, still smelling of cleaning products clinging to her skin. "My name is Gabriel Anderson. You saved me in a car accident a few months ago." Sarah's world stopped for a moment. There was the man she had helped, impeccably dressed, clearly wealthy, standing at the door of her miserable apartment. Shame washed over her like a gigantic wave. What are you doing here?" she managed to ask, her voice coming out as a whisper. "Can I come in? We need to talk." Sarah looked back, seeing the almost empty apartment through the eyes of a stranger. There was no longer a sofa, the kitchen table was an old plastic piece, and the walls had stains of moisture that she couldn't disguise. It was humiliating to receive someone like this, but she couldn't leave him at the door. "Please come in," she said, stepping aside. Gabriel entered the small apartment, his eyes quickly scanning the environment. Sarah saw when he noticed the empty spaces where furniture used to be, the absent television, the few remaining belongings. His face showed no judgment, just a thoughtful expression that she couldn't decipher. "Mum, who is he?" Emily asked, stepping out from behind her mother. The girl had the same green eyes as her mother, but a defensive posture that showed maturity beyond her 12 years. "He's the man from the accident I told you about, sweetheart," Sarah explained, protectively running her hand through Emily's hair. Gabriel knelt to be at eye level with the girl. "You must be Emily. Your mother saved my life," he said, his voice losing its formality and gaining a warmer tone. "She always helps everyone," Emily replied, studying Gabriel with the natural suspicion of a child who had learned to be cautious with strangers. Gabriel stood up and looked directly at Sarah. "I need to apologize for something terrible that happened." "Apologize? For what?" Sarah asked, furrowing her brow. "You were fired from Hope Textiles the day you saved me, weren't you?" Sarah nodded slowly, not understanding where he was going with this. "Sarah," Gabriel said, his voice laden with an emotion he was trying to control. "I am the owner of Hope Textiles." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah felt as if someone had sucked all the air out of the apartment. She leaned against the wall, trying to process the information. You are the boss," she whispered, her voice heavy with disbelief. "I am. And I found out that you lost your job for staying with me until the ambulance arrived. It was an absurd injustice, and I came here to correct it." Sarah let out a bitter laugh, devoid of humor. "Correct? Do you think you can correct 3 months of unemployment? 3 months of going hungry, selling my furniture, accepting charity from the church?" Gabriel stepped forward, but Sarah raised her hand, making him stop. "You have no idea what I've been through," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "You don't know what it's like to explain to a 12-year-old daughter why you don't have money to buy a book, why you can no longer eat meat, why you had to sell the television." "Mom." Emily gently touched her mother's arm, trying to calm her. "You are right," Gabriel said, his voice low but firm. "I have no idea, but I came here because I want to try to repair the damage that was done." "Repair how?" Sarah challenged. "With money? Do you think you can throw some bills in my face and everything will be resolved?" Gabriel took a deep breath. "I want to offer you a job, a good job, with a fair salary in the management of the company." Sarah stared at him as if he had spoken in Chinese. "Management? Are you crazy? I'm a machine operator. I don't even have a high school diploma." "You have something more important than a diploma," Gabriel said. "You have character. You have integrity. You risked your own well-being to help a stranger. And look where that got me," Sarah shot back. "My integrity doesn't pay the bills, doesn't put food on the table." Emily positioned herself between the two, looking alternately at her mother and Gabriel. "Mom, maybe she should listen to what he has to say." "Emily is right," said Gabriel gently. "Can I explain my proposal better?" Sarah hesitated. Part of her wanted to send that rich man away, to shout that he couldn't just show up in her life thinking money could solve everything. But another part, the practical part, that knew they were in the worst financial situation of their lives, whispered that she should at least listen. "All right," she finally said, "but I won't accept charity." Gabriel nodded. "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a job." He sat down in the only available chair, a white plastic piece that Sarah had bought at a garage sale, and explained his proposal. A position in the administrative department, a starting salary of $1,500, health insurance, meal vouchers. "Why?" Sarah asked when he finished. "Why would you do this for me?" Gabriel looked her in the eyes. "Because you did the right thing when you could have simply moved on. Because you have qualities that aren't taught in university. And because," he hesitated, "because I need people like you in my company. And what if I can't handle it? What if I don't know how to do the job?" "You'll learn. I'll make sure you have all the support you need." Sarah looked at Emily, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. She glanced around the empty apartment, thought about the overdue bills, the empty fridge, the humiliation of depending on others' charity. "And the supervisor who fired me, Richard. He won't be working at the company anymore," Gabriel said, with a firmness that left no doubt. "Are you going to fire him because of me?" "I'm going to fire him because I found out he has a history of treating employees unfairly." "You weren't the first." Sarah sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. It was a lot to process all at once. The man she had saved was her former boss. He was offering a job she had never dreamed of having. It seemed too good to be true. "I need to think," she finally said. "Of course," Gabriel agreed, standing up. "But Sarah, you saved my life. Now let me help you save yours." After he left, Sarah sat on the floor, staring at the closed door. Emily sat next to her, resting her head on her shoulder. "What do you think, Mom?" "I think he seems sincere," Emily said. "And Mom, we need this." Sarah knew her daughter was right, but part of her still had doubts. It was hard to believe that something good could happen after so much suffering. That night, for the first time in months, Sarah felt hope. But she was also scared. Scared of being disappointed again, scared of not being good enough, scared that all of this was just a cruel dream. What she didn't know was that Gabriel was also scared. Scared that she would reject his offer, Scared that he wouldn't be able to make up for the injustice that had been done, and most importantly, scared of what he was starting to feel for that brave woman who had saved him without asking for anything in return. Topic 6. First Steps in a New World. The following Monday, Sarah Johnson stood in front of the fogged-up bathroom mirror, trying to give a minimally professional appearance to the only business outfit she owned, a black skirt she had bought at a garage sale, and a white blouse that had seen better days. Her hands trembled as she tried to put her hair up in a bun, more from nerves than from the chilly September morning. "Mom, you look beautiful," said Emily, appearing in the bathroom doorway with her school backpack already on her back. The girl had woken up early to help her mother get ready and still make it to school on time. "I don't know if I can do this, sweetheart," Sarah confessed, looking at her own reflection. "What if I mess up? What if he realizes I'm not cut out for this job?" Emily hugged her mother from behind. "You can do it, Mom. You're the smartest person I know." Sarah smiled, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. Her daughter's unwavering confidence had always been her safe harbor in the toughest moments. The journey to the Hope Textiles headquarters in downtown was an adventure in itself. Sarah had never worked in such an upscale area of the city, with its mirrored buildings and expensive cars circulating on the wide streets. The contrast with the housing complex where she lived was so stark that she felt like an actress playing a role for which she hadn't prepared. The company's building was a 25-story glass tower with a marble lobby that echoed with every step. Sarah approached the reception desk, where a young blonde woman, impeccably made up, greeted her with a professional smile. "Good morning, I'm Sarah Johnson. I have an appointment with Mr. Gabriel Anderson," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Of course you're expected. 23rd floor, President's office," the receptionist replied, handing her a visitor badge. In the elevator, Sarah observed the other passengers, well-dressed executives, women in expensive suits and high heels, all carrying a confidence she secretly envied. When the doors opened on the 23rd floor, she was greeted by Helena Smith, Gabriel's secretary. "Sarah Johnson?" Helena asked. An elegant, middle-aged woman with perfectly styled blonde hair in a bob and a navy blue suit that looked like it had come straight out of a fashion magazine. "Yes, that's me," Sarah replied, immediately feeling inadequate next to the woman who seemed born for that environment. "Welcome. Mr. Anderson is waiting," Helena said, guiding her down a corridor adorned with artwork and a panoramic view of New York. Gabriel was standing behind a massive dark wood desk, wearing a grey suit that accentuated his blue eyes. When he saw Sarah enter, he smiled, a genuine smile that eased her nerves, a bit of the tension she carried. "Sarah, I'm glad you came," he said, walking around the table to greet her. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," she admitted, accepting his handshake. Her hands were cold and slightly damp, in contrast to the warm firmness of Gabriel's hands. "That's normal. I'll introduce you to the team and show you where you'll be working." Gabriel guided her through the floors of the company, introducing her to various employees. Sarah tried to memorize names and roles, but everything seemed like a blur of smiling faces and polite greetings. Some looked at her with barely concealed curiosity, clearly wondering who this woman was that the president was personally introducing. "This will be your office," Gabriel said, stopping in front of a small but well-lit room with a desk, computer, and a window overlooking the building's courtyard. Sarah stepped in slowly, as if she were treading on sacred ground. "My office?" she repeated, incredulous. "Yes, you'll be working as an administrative assistant in the Human Resources Department. You'll help with reports, document organization, and employee support." "But I don't really know how to use a computer," Sarah confessed, looking at the monitor as if it were an alien. "You'll learn. Carla will help you in the first few days," Gabriel said, pointing to a young woman who had appeared at the door. Carla Miller was about 25, with curly hair tied back in a ponytail and a warm smile that immediately put Sarah at ease. She wore a blue midi skirt and a simple white blouse, but had an air of competence that inspired confidence. "Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the team," Carla said, extending her hand. "I'll be your work partner. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me." In the first few days, Sarah felt like a child learning to walk. Carla taught her how to use the computer, explained the company's systems, and showed her how to fill out reports. Sarah absorbed everything like a sponge, determined to prove she belonged there. "You learn quickly," Carla commented one Thursday, watching Sarah navigate the digital files with growing confidence. "I'm trying," Sarah said, saving a document she had just typed. "I still feel a bit lost, but each day gets a little easier." The real test came when Sarah had to assist her first employee with a complaint. It was a middle-aged man named John, a machine operator at the factory, who had come to headquarters to question deductions from his paycheck. $200 were deducted from my payment, and no one explains why, John said, clearly frustrated, slamming papers on Sarah's desk. Instead of feeling intimidated, Sarah felt a familiarity with the situation. She knew that frustration, that sense of helplessness in the face of corporate bureaucracy. "I'll check on that for you," she said calmly, calling the finance department. After several calls and consultations with the system, she discovered it had been an error. John had been deducted for absences he hadn't actually committed. "I'm sorry for the confusion, Mr. John. I'll arrange for the refund today," Sarah said, filling out the necessary forms. "Wow, thank you. I've been trying to resolve this for 2 months, and no one paid attention to me," John said, visibly relieved. When John left, Carla looked at Sarah with admiration. "You have a knack for this. Many people here would have treated him with less patience. I know what it's like to be in his shoes," Sarah said simply. But not everything was smooth sailing. Sarah soon realized there were tensions in the office that she didn't fully understand, especially with Vivian Carter, the Human Resources Director. Vivian was a 40-year-old woman, always impeccably dressed, with platinum blonde hair and a posture that exuded authority. She had an MBA from an American university and 15 years of experience in large corporations. From the first day, Sarah felt that Vivian was watching her with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "So you're the famous Sarah," Vivian said one Friday, appearing at Sarah's desk with a stack of documents. "Gabriel speaks very highly of you." "I'm trying to do the best job I can," Sarah replied, noticing the slightly acidic tone in Vivian's voice. "Of course. It must be interesting to work here after. How can I put this? Your previous experience at the factory." Sarah felt her blood rush to her face, but kept her composure. "I'm learning a lot every day." "That's good," Vivian said, leaving the documents on the desk. "I need you to organize these files by Monday. They are reports of all the employees who were laid off in the last 2 years. When Vivian walked away, Carla approached. "Don't mind her. Vivian has been a bit irritable since she found out you were coming to work here." "Why?" "I think she feels threatened. You have direct access to Gabriel, and that bothers some people." That night, Sarah came home exhausted but satisfied. Emily was waiting for her with the table set and a simple dinner prepared. "How was your day, Mom?" "Different," Sarah said, sitting down and serving rice with eggs for both of them. "I still feel like a fish out of water, but I think I'm starting to understand how things work." "And the boss? Is he nice?" Sarah hesitated. Gabriel had been nothing but respectful and professional, but she noticed something in his eyes when he looked at her, an attention that went beyond professional courtesy. "He's complicated," she finally said. "Rich, educated, but there's something about him I can't quite decipher." "Maybe he likes you," Emily suggested with the typical frankness of a 12-year-old. "Emily, don't say nonsense. He's my boss, and I'm just an employee." But while washing the dishes that night, Sarah couldn't shake her daughter's words from her mind. There was indeed something different about the way Gabriel treated her, a kindness that seemed to go beyond professional obligation. What she didn't know was that, on the other side of the city, Gabriel was in his office late, trying to focus on the monthly reports, but finding himself thinking about how her eyes Mariana's eyes sparkled when she managed to solve a problem, or how she treated the employees with a genuine empathy that he rarely saw in the corporate world. For the first time in years, Gabriel Anderson was finding reasons to be excited about going to work. And that scared him as much as it intrigued him. 3 weeks after starting at the company, Mariana was organizing the reports that Vivian had given her when she noticed something strange. It was a Friday afternoon, and most of the employees had already left, leaving the office in an almost sepulchral silence. The late afternoon light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows between the empty desks. Mariana was in the HR department's storage room, a small windowless room where old documents were kept. The smell of old paper and dust filled the air, and she had to use a ladder to reach the folders from previous years. That's when she found the first inconsistency. "Termination for just cause, excessive absences," read the report of John Smith, a machine operator who had been fired 6 months earlier. But when Mariana cross-referenced the information with the attendance records, she discovered that John had only missed work twice, both times with a medical certificate presented. Intrigued, she pulled out a few more files. Mary Johnson, terminated for low productivity, but her report showed numbers above average. Charles Brown, terminated for inappropriate behavior. The only occurrences in his record were praises from supervisors. "How strange," Mariana murmured to herself, stacking the documents on the desk. All the cases had one thing in common: the signature of Richard Thompson as the supervisor responsible for the termination. Mariana felt a chill in her stomach. She remembered the morning she was fired, the coldness with which Richard had treated her, the refusal to listen to her explanations. Had others suffered the same injustice as she had? "Still here, Mariana?" Gabriel's voice startled her. She turned and saw him standing at the door of the storage room, his tie loosened and the sleeves of his shirt rolled up. He looked tired, but his blue eyes carried a genuine concern. "Sorry, Mr. Anderson. I was finishing organizing these files," she said, instinctively covering the documents with her body. Gabriel approached, noticing her nervousness. "Did something happen?" Mariana hesitated. Part of her wanted to share her findings, but another part warned her of the risks. What if she was wrong? What if Gabriel thought she was inventing problems? What if it cost her job? I found some irregularities in the termination reports," she finally said, deciding that honesty was always the best path. Gabriel furrowed his brow. "What kind of irregularities?" With trembling hands, Mariana showed him the documents she had set aside. Gabriel took the folders, examining each one with growing attention. His expression grew darker with each page. "My God," he murmured, looking at the report of John Smith. "Are you sure about these figures?" "I checked 3 times. The reasons for the terminations don't match the actual records of the employees." Gabriel sat down in a chair next to Mariana, the scent of his expensive perfume mixing with the musty odor of the storage room. "How many cases did you find?" "So far, 17, all signed by the same supervisor." "Richard Thompson," Gabriel said, his voice laden with contained anger. Mariana nodded, watching the transformation on Gabriel's face. The kind and polite man she knew was being replaced by someone cold and dangerous. "Mariana, this is very serious. If this information is correct, we are talking about systematic, unjust terminations. Why would someone do that?" Gabriel was silent for a moment, processing the implications. "It could be for various reasons. Maybe he's receiving a commission for reducing the workforce. Maybe it's just an abuse of power. Or maybe—" He stopped speaking, a worried expression crossing his face. "Maybe what?" Mariana insisted. "Maybe he's trying to eliminate witnesses to something bigger." That night, Gabriel couldn't sleep. He stayed in his mansion's office until 2 in the morning, analyzing every document Mariana had found. He called Robert Johnson, the private investigator, and requested an urgent investigation into Richard Thompson. Mariana also spent the night tossing and turning in bed, wondering if she had done the right thing. Emily, sensing her mother's restlessness, joined her in bed. "Mom, are you worried about something?" "I found some things at work that could complicate my life a lot," Mariana confessed, hugging her daughter. "Bad things?" Things that some people might not want discovered. The following Monday, the atmosphere in the office was tense. Vivian Carter arrived earlier than usual and went straight to the storage room. When she came out, her face was pale. "Mariana, I need to talk to you," Vivian said, her voice controlled but with an underlying note of threat. They headed to Vivian's office, a luxurious space with glass furniture and a panoramic view of the city. Vivian closed the door and sat behind her desk, watching Mariana with calculating eyes. "I heard you've been digging into the old files," Vivian said. "Mr. Anderson asked me to organize the documents," Mariana replied, keeping her voice steady despite her nervousness. "And you thought you should investigate inconsistencies?" "I thought I should do my job properly." Vivian leaned forward. "Mariana, you're new here. You don't understand how things work. Sometimes administrative decisions can seem confusing to those who don't have the full context. 17 unjust terminations aren't a matter of context. Be careful with your accusations," Vivian said, her voice growing colder. "Richard Thompson is an experienced supervisor with over 20 years in the company. His decisions have always been backed by management." Mariana felt a shiver. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm giving you advice. Focus on your current job and leave the investigations to those who are competent to handle them." Vivian's office found Carla waiting with a worried expression. "I saw you talking. Is everything okay?" "I think I just discovered that I have more enemies than I thought," said Sarah. That afternoon, Gabriel called an urgent meeting. Only his closest team members were present: Helena, Charles Miller from HR, Fernando Carter from Finance. And now, Sarah. "We found serious irregularities in the termination processes of the East Side unit," announced Gabriel, his voice cutting through the silence of the meeting room. Charles paled. "What kind of irregularities?" "Terminations based on false information. Honest employees being harmed for non-existent reasons." "This is very serious," said Fernando. "It could lead to million-dollar lawsuits." Gabriel looked directly at Sarah. It was Sarah who uncovered these irregularities. "It shows the kind of professional we need, someone who isn't afraid to do the right thing." Charles coughed nervously. "Gabriel, maybe we should investigate more before making any drastic decisions." "I am already investigating," Gabriel replied coldly. "And depending on what we find, some heads will roll." After the meeting, Gabriel called Sarah for a private conversation. "I need you to know that you might be in danger," he said, closing the door to his office. "What kind of danger?" "If Richard Thompson is involved in something illegal, he won't like having someone investigating his actions. And if there are others involved—" "Miss Vivian threatened me today," Sarah interrupted. Gabriel stopped in the middle of the room. "What do you mean, threatened?" Sarah recounted her conversation with Vivian, seeing Gabriel's expression grow darker. "Sarah, I want you to be very careful from now on. Don't work alone after hours. Don't touch the files without someone present." "Mr. Gabriel," Sarah said, looking directly into his eyes, "I don't regret uncovering this. If there are people being unjustly harmed, someone needs to stand up for them." Gabriel watched her for a long moment, seeing the determination in her green eyes. In that instant, he realized that his feelings for Sarah had evolved far beyond gratitude or professional admiration. "That's why you're special," he said softly. "You always do the right thing, even when it harms you." The moment was interrupted by Helena's entrance. "Sorry to interrupt, but an urgent report just came in from the private detective." Gabriel grabbed the sealed envelope, opening it quickly. His expression changed completely as he read. "Sarah," he said, his voice grave, "we just discovered that the problem is much bigger than we thought." Across town, Richard Thompson was in a clandestine meeting in a dark bar in the East Side, talking to a man in a cheap suit and sunglasses. "The new employee found the files," Richard said nervously. "Then you know what you need to do," the man replied. "Some problems need to be eliminated." Sarah had no idea that her life had just become much more dangerous. Trying again. Topic 8. Bonds that strengthen. It was a Friday in October when Sarah's life was turned upside down once again. She was organizing the last reports of the day when her phone rang with the number from Emily's school. Her heart raced. The school only called in emergencies. "Miss Sarah, this is the school nurse. Emily fell ill during gym class. She has a high fever and difficulty breathing." Sarah's world collapsed. She hung up the phone with trembling hands and rushed to the elevator, not caring about the curious looks from her colleagues. On the way to the school, her hands were cold and sweaty as she gripped the bus steering wheel, praying it wasn't anything serious. When she arrived at the school, she found Emily lying in the nurse's office, her face flushed with fever and breathing heavily. The girl who had always been strong and healthy looked so fragile there, wearing her wrinkled school uniform. "Mom," Emily murmured, trying to sit up when she saw Sarah enter. "Calm down, my love. Mommy is here," said Sarah, stroking her daughter's damp hair. "How are you feeling?" "It hurts to breathe," Emily whispered, her green eyes so similar to her mother's, showing a vulnerability that broke Sarah's heart. The school nurse, a short lady with grey hair, approached with a worried expression. "I think we should take her to the hospital. The fever is very high, and this difficulty in breathing concerns me." At the nearest public hospital, Sarah faced the cruel reality of the healthcare system. Long lines, few doctors, hours of waiting. Emily was getting worse, and Sarah felt completely helpless. She had called to inform Gabriel that she wouldn't be returning to work, but she didn't explain why. Just said it was a family emergency. It was 5 hours of waiting until they were finally seen. The doctor, a visibly overwhelmed young resident, quickly examined Emily. "Suspected pneumonia," he said, without looking up from the chart. "We will need to admit her for observation and intravenous antibiotics." "Admit her?" Sarah repeated, feeling her legs wobble.
For how long?
"It depends on her progress. It could be a few days." The room where Emily was admitted was a depressing environment, peeling walls, only 4 beds separated by torn curtains, the smell of disinfectant mixed with mold. Sarah pulled a plastic chair next to her daughter's bed, determined not to leave. "Mum, you need to go to work," Emily said, even with her weak voice. "You can't lose your job because of me. I don't care about any job. What matters is that you get better," replied Sarah, holding her daughter's small, warm hand. It was almost midnight when Gabriel appeared at the door of the room. Sarah, who had been dozing in the uncomfortable chair, woke up startled to see the familiar figure standing in the entrance. "Gabriel, what are you doing here?" He approached, wearing a blue polo shirt and jeans, a more casual version of the businessman she knew. He carried a bag and a genuinely worried expression. "Helena told me you had a family emergency. I was worried and decided to come." As she organized old cardboard boxes in the storage room of the apartment, Mariana made a discovery. "Did you need anything?" "How did you know where we were?" Gabriel hesitated. "I might have been a bit invasive, but I called a few schools in the area until I found out where Emily studied. Then I called the nearby hospitals." Mariana didn't know whether to feel grateful or annoyed by the invasion of privacy, but Gabriel's presence brought unexpected comfort. "How is she?" Gabriel asked, looking at Emily, who was sleeping connected to an IV. "Pneumonia. The doctors said it's serious, but with the right treatment, she'll be fine." Gabriel surveyed the surroundings, the hospital's poor conditions, the lack of proper equipment, the overwhelmed nurse trying to care for 20 patients at once. "Mariana, can I suggest something?" "What?" "Let me transfer Emily to St. Mary's Hospital. She'll receive the best possible care there." Mariana stiffened. "No, I won't accept charity." "It's not charity. It's the least I can do for a valued employee." "Gabriel, you know this isn't company protocol. You're doing this because I care about you." Gabriel interrupted, his voice low but intense. "Because you saved my life, because you're an exceptional person, and because I can't just sit here watching your daughter suffer when I can help." Mariana looked at Emily, who coughed even in her sleep, then at Gabriel, who was watching her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Why do you care so much?" Gabriel sat in the other plastic chair, leaning closer to Mariana. "Do you want the honest answer?" "Always. Because you reminded me of what's important." I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who only care about what I can offer. You were the first person who helped me without wanting anything in return. I just did what any decent person would do. No, Mariana, it wasn't just that. You have something I've never seen in anyone, a genuine kindness that doesn't depend on recognition or reward. They sat in silence for a moment, just listening to the sounds of the hospital, machines beeping, footsteps in the hallway, whispered conversations. "Accept my help," Gabriel said gently. "Not out of charity, but because you would do the same if our situations were reversed." Mariana closed her eyes, battling her pride. She knew Gabriel was right. If she had the means, she wouldn't hesitate to help someone in the same situation. "Okay," she finally said, "but I will pay you back. It might take years, but I will." Gabriel smiled. "If that makes you feel better, it's a deal." 2 hours later, Emily was being transferred to a private ambulance that would take her to St. Mary's Hospital. Mariana watched everything in shock. She never imagined she would one day be in that luxurious hospital, with rooms that looked like hotel suites. "Much better," Emily commented when she woke up in the new room, looking at the large TV on the wall and the comfortable bed. "It's temporary," Mariana warned. "As soon as you get better, we're going home." But Emily was looking at Gabriel, who had stayed there throughout the transfer. "Thank you for taking care of my mom," the girl said with surprising maturity. "Your mom is a very special person," Gabriel replied. "And so are you." For the next 3 days, Gabriel showed up at the hospital every day. He brought food for Mariana, chatted with Emily about school and books, and made sure the best doctors were taking care of the case. It was during one of those visits that Mariana found Gabriel talking to the doctor in the hallway. Severe bacterial pneumonia, but responding well to antibiotics. In 2 days, she could be discharged, Mariana overheard as she approached. "Doctor, is there any risk of complications?" Gabriel asked with a concern that surprised Mariana. "No. With the proper treatment, she will be completely cured." When the doctor walked away, Mariana confronted Gabriel. "Why are you getting so involved? Emily isn't your responsibility." Gabriel looked her in the eyes. "Mariana, can I be honest with you? I'd prefer you to be. My feelings for you are not just professional." Mariana's heart raced. "Gabriel, I know it might seem inappropriate. I know the difference between our lives, but I can't deny what I feel. You're my boss. That complicates everything." "It complicates," Gabriel agreed. "But does that change how I feel?" Mariana fell silent, processing the confession. Part of her felt the same attraction. Gabriel was kind, generous, and treated both her and Emily with genuine care. But another part warned her about the risks of getting involved with someone from such a different world. "I need to think," she finally said. "Of course. I just wanted you to know." On the night Emily was discharged, they took a taxi home, paid for by Gabriel, despite Mariana's protests. The apartment had never felt so welcoming after the stagnant days in the hospital. "Mom," Emily said, already lying in her bed, "Gabriel likes you." "Emily, and you like him too. I see how you look at each other," Mariana sighed. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Why does it have to be? He's nice, treats you well, and did all this for me without needing anything in return. Because he's rich and I'm poor. Because he's my boss. Because people like us don't date people like him." Emily frowned. "That doesn't make sense. You like each other, the rest is nonsense." Lying in her own bed that night, Mariana reflected on her daughter's words. Perhaps Emily, with her simple, childlike view, was seeing something that she, with all her fears and prejudices, was missing. What she didn't know was that on the other side of the city, Gabriel was also unable to sleep, thinking the same thing. Could love really overcome all differences? Sarah was at school, and she took advantage of Saturday to do a thorough cleaning, trying to organize the few belongings that remained after all the difficult months. The box was hidden behind others, covered in dust and with yellowed tape from age. When Sarah opened it, she found old photographs, documents of her deceased mother, and some yellowed letters. Mrs. Johnson had passed away 3 years earlier. taking with her many secrets she had never shared with her daughter. "Work letters," Sarah murmured to herself, picking up the first envelope. Her mother's neat handwriting was addressed to Mendonça family, Maple Grove. Sarah felt her heart race. Mendonça was not a common surname. Could it be that... With trembling hands, she opened the first letter, dated March 1995. "Dear Mrs. Beatrice, thank you for the opportunity to work in your home. Little Gabriel is a lovely boy, always polite with me. Yesterday, he asked me about my daughter Emily, who plays in the garden while I work. It's nice to see how he cares for the people around him." Sarah dropped the letter from her hands. Gabriel, the Gabriel she knew, had her mother worked as a housekeeper for the Mendonça family when they were children. Hastily, she opened other letters. Today, little Emily brought a drawing for Gabriel. He was so happy that he asked you to frame it. Sometimes I think these two have a special connection. Gabriel asked why Emily doesn't come to play here anymore. I had to explain that she started attending public school and can't come with me to work anymore. He was sad. Sarah sat on the floor of the small room, surrounded by the letters, trying to process the information. She had played in Gabriel's mansion garden as a child. They had met long before the accident. How could neither of them remember? The last letter in the pile was different, more formal, dated December 1999. "Mrs. Beatrice, with a heavy heart, I must inform you that I can no longer work in your home. My daughter Emily needs me, and I found a job in a factory that allows me to be more present. I thank you for all these years and hope that Gabriel becomes the good man he already shows to be." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to remember. Vague images began to surface in her mind. A vast garden, a large house, a dark-haired boy who always shared his toys with her. How had she forgotten? The sound of the door opening brought her back to reality. Emily was coming home from school early. "Mom, why are you sitting on the floor?" the girl asked, throwing her backpack on the sofa. "Honey, come here. I need to show you something." Sarah told her about the discovery, showing the letters to Emily. The girl listened with wide eyes. "So you knew Gabriel when you were a child?" "Apparently, yes, and I don't remember anything. Are you going to tell him?" Sarah hesitated. The revelation changed everything. It wasn't a coincidence that she felt compelled to help Gabriel during the accident. It wasn't a coincidence that they had such a strong connection. There was something destined about their meeting. On Monday, Sarah arrived at work with the letters in her bag, but lacked the courage to approach Gabriel. How to bring up such a delicate subject? How to explain that they had a shared history that neither of them remembered? It was Gabriel who came looking for her at the end of the afternoon. "Sarah, you seem different today. Did something happen?" They were in her small office, with the door closed. Gabriel sat in the chair across from her desk, his expression worried. "Gabriel," Sarah began, her voice trembling, "I need to show you something I discovered over the weekend." She pulled the letters from her bag, handing them to him. "These are letters my mother wrote when she worked as a housekeeper. In your home." Gabriel furrowed his brow, taking the first letter. As he read, his expression changed from confusion to astonishment, then to a deep emotion he tried to control. "My God," he murmured, looking at Sarah with completely different eyes. "You're the girl from the garden. Do you remember?" Gabriel closed his eyes, concentrating. "Now that you mention it, I vaguely remember a girl who played with me when I was a child. Curly hair, green eyes, always smiling. And I remember a kind boy who always shared his toys with me." They fell silent for a moment, processing the revelation. Gabriel stood up and walked to the window, the letters still in his hands. "That explains a lot," he finally said. "What?" "Why I felt so connected to you since the accident. Why your voice felt familiar. Why—" he turned to look at her. "Why I feel like I've known you for much longer than I should." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. "My mother wrote that we had a special connection." Gabriel came back to her, crouching beside her chair. "Sarah, this changes everything." "What do you mean?" "It means it wasn't a coincidence that you helped me that day. It means there's something bigger connecting our lives." At that moment, Helena opened the office door without knocking. stopping abruptly upon seeing Gabriel crouched beside Sarah, both clearly in an intimate moment. "Sorry, I didn't know you were," Helena stammered, visibly uncomfortable. "It's nothing, Helena. What did you need?" Gabriel said, quickly standing up. "Your mother called. She said it's urgent." Gabriel sighed. "Tell her I'll call her in 5 minutes." After Helena left, Gabriel turned back to Sarah. "I need to process all of this." "You do too, Gabriel. This can't leak to anyone else. If people knew that we knew each other as children, why would that be a problem? Because they'll think you gave me the job because of that, not because of merit. They'll say I'm privileged to have a personal connection with you." Gabriel nodded, understanding her concern. "Keep it between us for now." That night, Gabriel went home with his head buzzing. He climbed up to the attic of the mansion, where his mother kept boxes of old belongings. After searching for a while, he found a box with his childhood items. There it was, a colorful drawing made with crayons, signed "For Gabriel from Sarah" in the lower corner. It was a simple drawing of 2 children playing in a garden, but Gabriel remembered the day he received it. He had asked his mother to frame it. He also found old family photos. In one of them, taken during a birthday party, he could identify a girl with curly hair in the background, playing with other staff's children. It was Sarah, he was sure. Gabriel went down to the living room where his mother, Beatrice, was having tea and reading a society magazine. "Mom, I need to ask you something about when I was a child." Beatrice looked up from her magazine. "Of course, dear. What do you want to know?" "Do you remember Rose Johnson?" "She worked here as a housekeeper." Beatrice's expression changed slightly. "Rose? Yes, of course. She worked here for a few years." "Why are you asking?" "And her daughter, Sarah?" "Oh, yes." "A sweet girl. Sometimes she came to work with her mother. You two played together." Beatrice studied her son's face. "Why this sudden interest in the past?" Gabriel hesitated. "It's a long story, Mom." "Gabriel, did something happen?" "You're acting strange." "Sarah. She works for me now." Beatrice nearly dropped her teacup. "What do you mean?" Gabriel told her the whole story. The accident, the unfair dismissal, the reunion, the discovered letters. Beatrice listened in silence, her expression growing more worried. "Gabriel, you need to be very careful," she said when he finished. "Why?" "Because people will misinterpret it. They'll think you're having an affair with a former cleaning staff member." "Mom, she isn't a former cleaning staff member. She's an extraordinary woman who comes from a completely different world than ours," Beatrice interrupted. "Gabriel, I liked Rose and Sarah when they were little. But you are adults now, in very different positions in life. And does that matter?" "It matters to the rest of society. It matters to business. It matters to our family." Gabriel stood up, irritated. I'm talking about someone who saved my life, and you've already rewarded her with a job. That should be enough." "It's not about reward. It's about feelings." Beatrice sighed deeply. "Gabriel, you're confusing gratitude with love." "I'm not confusing anything." Mother and son stared at each other in silence for a long moment. Finally, Beatrice spoke. "If you really have feelings for this woman, you need to be sure you're willing to face the consequences." "Because it won't be easy for either of you." Gabriel nodded, knowing his mother was right. But he also knew that some feelings were too strong to be ignored. On the other side of the city, Sarah was in the kitchen washing dishes when Emily approached. "Mom, are you in love with Gabriel?" Sarah stopped scrubbing the plate in her hands. "Why do you ask that?" "Because you act differently when you talk about him. And today you got emotional about those letters." Sarah dried her hands on a dish towel, turning to her daughter. "Emily, sometimes life is more complicated than it seems. But do you like him?" "Yes," Sarah admitted. "I do like him." "Then why can't you be with him?" "Because people like us don't end up with people like him. That's how the world works." "That's nonsense," said Emily, with the typical frankness of a child. "If you like each other, the rest doesn't matter." Sarah smiled sadly. "I wish it were that simple, my daughter." But as she finished washing the dishes, Sarah couldn't stop thinking, was Emily right? Do children sometimes see the truth more clearly than adults? The month of December brought with it the traditional festival of Hope Textiles, a celebration that Gabriel had maintained for family tradition but rarely participated in actively. This year, however, he was determined to get more involved, especially since Sarah had offered to help with the organization based on her experience with community events in the East Side housing complex. The festival would be held in the factory's courtyard at the East Unit, transformed for the occasion into a large festival with typical food stalls, folk dancing, and musical performances. It was a sunny Saturday, and Sarah arrived early to oversee the final preparations. She wore a blue and white cotton dress that she had bought on sale, her hair loose in natural waves over her shoulders. She was radiant in her element, coordinating vendors and staff with a naturalness that impressed everyone. "Mrs. Johnson, where would you like us to put the hot spice drink table?" asked Mr. Johnson, a retired worker helping with the organization. "Over there near the stage, but leave enough space for people to move around," Sarah replied, pointing to the ideal spot. "And don't forget to set up chairs for the elderly." Gabriel arrived an hour later, accompanied by his mother, Beatrice, who had insisted on attending the event. He searched for Sarah with his eyes and found her organizing the corn pudding stall, laughing at some joke one of the cooks had told. "Is that her?" Beatrice asked discreetly, following her son's gaze. "That's her," Gabriel confirmed, unable to hide the smile forming on his lips. Beatrice watched Sarah for a long moment. She saw a beautiful, natural woman who was clearly comfortable leading and organizing. But she also saw the obvious differences. The simple dress, the lack of expensive jewelry, the familiarity with which she treated the workers. "Gabriel," Beatrice said softly, "she seems like a good person. But are you sure you're ready for the complications that will come?" Before Gabriel, Sarah saw them and approached, wiping her hands on the apron she wore over her dress. "Gabriel, I'm so glad you came," she said, her genuine smile lighting up her face. "Mrs. Beatrice, right? It's a pleasure to meet you." "I'm Sarah." Beatrice studied the young woman's face, searching for traces of the girl who used to play in her garden many years ago. "Sarah? Yes, now I can see it. You've grown into a very beautiful woman." "Thank you," Sarah said, blushing slightly. "I hope you enjoy the party. We tried to make something special for all the employees." "From what I see, you succeeded," Beatrice commented, observing the family starting to arrive, children running between the booths, and the sound of an accordion filling the air. As the afternoon progressed, Gabriel watched Sarah move through the party like a natural host. She knew the names of the employees' children, asked about sick relatives, and solved small problems with a smile. It was exactly the kind of leadership the company needed. Approachable, human, genuine. "She has a gift," commented Helena, who had approached Gabriel. "The employees respect her in a way I rarely see." "It's because she came from where they came from," Gabriel said. "She understands their struggles." The most emotional moment of the party arrived when it was time for the dance. Sarah had organized a performance with the employees' children, but one pair was missing to complete the dance. Without hesitation, she took Gabriel's hand. "Come on, boss. You can't just watch," she said, pulling him into the center of the circle. "Sarah, I don't know how to dance this," Gabriel protested, but he was already being dragged. "It's easy. Just follow my lead." The music started. An upbeat folk tune played live by a local band. Gabriel felt awkward at first, but Sarah's infectious joy and the encouraging shouts from the employees soon relaxed him. They danced, swaying, stepping, walking in circles, laughing at their own mistakes. It was during one of the turns in the dance that their eyes met, and the world around seemed to disappear. There, in the middle of the dance, with the scent of hot spiced drink and corn pudding in the air and the sound of the accordion in the background, Gabriel had an epiphany. He was completely in love with Sarah Johnson. When the music ended, everyone applauded, but Gabriel and Sarah continued to look at each other for a moment that felt eternal. "Thank you for the dance," Gabriel said softly. "It was a pleasure," Sarah replied, her green eyes shining under the colorful lights of the party. The magic of the moment was interrupted by Emily, who came running in a yellow twirly skirt, her cheeks flushed from playing. "Mom, you danced with Gabriel." Everyone saw, the girl exclaimed excitedly. "Emily, shouldn't you be playing with the other kids?" Sarah said, trying to disguise her embarrassment. "I am, but I came to get you. Mrs. Smith said the guitar performance is about to start." Gabriel remembered that he had hired a local guitarist to wrap up the party. "Shall we watch together?" he suggested. They headed toward the makeshift stage, where a middle-aged man was tuning his guitar. The musician began to play Asa Branca, and many of the employees sang along, their voices blending in the warm December night. Gabriel looked around and saw something he had never experienced before, a true sense of community. Whole families gathered, children playing freely, workers relaxed and happy. And at the center of it all, Sarah had been the catalyst for that joy. "Can I speak to you privately?" Gabriel whispered in Sarah's ear. They stepped away from the crowd, walking to a more secluded area of the yard, illuminated only by the festival lights in the distance. "Sarah," Gabriel began, his voice heavy with emotion, "today I had a certainty." "What certainty?" "That I'm in love with you." Sarah's heart raced. "Gabriel, I know it's complicated. I know we will face prejudices, gossip, judgments. I know our lives are very different. They really are," Sarah said, her voice almost a whisper. "But I also know I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you. You make me want to be a better person. You make me see the world differently." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. "Gabriel, you don't understand. I'm in love with you too. But that scares me more than it makes me happy." "Why?" "Because I'll always be the former worker you promoted. They'll always say I got where I am because of our relationship, not because of my own merit." Gabriel stepped closer, gently taking her hands. "And does that matter more than what we feel? It matters for my dignity. It matters for the example I set for Emily." They fell silent for a moment, listening to the guitar and the voices of the party in the distance. "Sarah," Gabriel finally said, "remember when we were kids and played in the garden? There were no differences between us then. We were just two people who liked being together. But we grew up. The world changed. But our hearts didn't. We are still the same people who connected so many years ago." Sarah looked at Gabriel, his sincere blue eyes, his vulnerable expression, the way he held her hands as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "What if it doesn't work out?" she asked. "What if it does?" Gabriel countered. It was then that Sarah made the decision that would change her life forever. She leaned forward and kissed Gabriel. It was a soft kiss, filled with contained emotion, sealing a silent agreement between them. When they parted, Gabriel smiled. "Does this mean you're going to give me a chance?" "It means I'm going to try to be brave," Sarah replied. Across the yard, Beatrice watched the scene with a mix of apprehension and resignation. Helena beside her sighed. "They make a beautiful couple," Helena commented. "They do," Beatrice agreed. "I just hope they're prepared for the storm that's coming." But at that moment, under the December stars and surrounded by the sounds of the party, Sarah and Gabriel could only think of one thing: that some loves are strong enough to weather any storm. 3 months later, when Hope Textiles implemented the new Employee Assistance Program, designed and coordinated by Sarah, when Richard Thompson was arrested for fraud and selling confidential information, and when Sarah was promoted to Director of Human Relations, the employees of the company discovered something important. Sometimes the best leadership comes from those who truly understand what it means to fight for every achievement. And on a March morning, when Gabriel proposed to Sarah in the same garden where they played as children, with Emily as a witness and tears of joy in everyone's eyes, they proved that true love knows no social classes, does not bend to prejudices, and always finds a way to triumph. Sarah Johnson learned that her altruistic nature was not a weakness, but her greatest strength. Gabriel Anderson discovered that true wealth lies not in what one possesses, but in what one shares. And Emily gained not only a stepfather who loved her as a daughter, but also an example that in life, as in all true fairy tales, a happy ending is just the beginning of an even more beautiful story.